So today I decided to hop on Eater Pro to test my Ryzeal deck and try to figure out if I could learn anything and improve. And it didn't really go exactly according to plan. I think I managed to have the absolute worst match ever, and I swear to God, I feel like this is just about to become average. Get your popcorn ready and brace yourselves for the most thrilling and exciting Yu-Gi-Oh gameplay you have ever seen. So essentially in game 1, my opponent misplays, so I win, which does matter since if he played correctly, I most certainly would have lost with the hand that I had. Game 2 is where the madness begins. So I full roast my opponent on the effect of Ice to special summon a monster from deck, which means I draw 2 if he makes 1 rank 4, and I draw 3 if he full combos. But I end up drawing 0 because he ashes the full roast, obviously, yeah, story of my life. But I do have the Ash for his Duo Drive. Unfortunately, he has the cross out for my Ash, so all my hand shops got checked. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he thrusts into the nastiest floodgate imaginable. It's your boy Harpy's Featherstorm. My Book of Eclipse obviously won't save me from that lingering floodgate, so the game ends pretty much a few seconds later when I realize that Baguska can just get negated by his aggregator. Yes, thrilling Yu-Gi-Oh gameplay, that's what I promised you, remember? I hope you still have some popcorn left because game 3 is where it becomes even more enjoyable. So this time I go first and I summon Sword Ryzeal, which by the way is not really full combo, it is a little worse than drawing Ice or X Ryzeal. And I choose not to go for Duo Drive because that would actually lose out to a combination of, let's say, Nibiru plus Ash or Ogre, Veiler, Imperm, or Mourner. So I played safe and I end on Castel, set to back row, and pass turn. As soon as he summons his Ice Ryzeal, I flip Featherstorm, he passes turn, and then I Trap Trick into the second, or I guess the third Featherstorm. And then when it's my turn again, I flip Featherstorm, which means that even if he has like 75,000 hand traps, it's not gonna matter. I'm just gonna pop off, and that's exactly what I do, so there you go, Merry Christmas. That was the absolute most back and forth Yu-Gi-Oh match I've ever had in my whole career. Basically, in a full 3-game match, the star of the deck, Ryzeal Detonator, was completely irrelevant, and the most pivotal cards were the exact same for both me and my opponent. Game 2, my opponent used Triple Tactic Thrust to fetch the Featherstorm, and Game 3, I had a physical copy in my hand as well as the Trap Trick for the second, or I guess the third Featherstorm. I've gotten to the point where I'm really fed up with games being solely dictated by non-engine cards, as it just opens up the door to sackiness and just shuts down the interaction. And I want to see Featherstorm as the perfect example of the kind of card that clearly should not exist, but due to how few decks have historically been able to abuse it, Konami just kinda gave it a pass. The issue is, the card is still designed poorly, and just because a card doesn't ruin Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't mean it'll never do. Because Featherstorm has the potential of destroying this game at any moment, and I think that the Ryzeal deck is probably the very first quote-unquote tier 0 deck that can take full advantage of it. In a world where you can play 3 copies of Trap Trick and 3 copies of Featherstorm, you already have a 46.78% chance of drawing both your 1-card starter and either Featherstorm or Trap Trick. And obviously this probability skyrockets when we factor in the existence of other enablers such as Triple Tactic Thrust. And of course draw powers such as Dugaris, Ryzeal Cross, and Desires. So usually more than 60 to 70% of the time people will sack you with a 1-card FTK when they go first against you post game 1. Because honestly it's not too unlikely to see the Ryzeal deck draw anywhere between 3 to 5 cards with both Dugaris and the Field Spell and Desires. And again, when you factor in the fact that they only really need one specific card to win, it's pretty scary. Now you might be thinking, but Yaksign, there are some counters to Featherstorm out there. For example, you could use Crossout against it. Okay, look, are you really trying to side in Featherstorm going second just to see if your opponent may or may not be playing it in the first place? How about Dimensional Barrier? Are you okay letting that one slide? Because clearly you're not trying to side 3 Crossout and 2 trap cards going second. Because at that point your deck is playing such few non-engine cards that you'll actually be losing more often than not. Remember that Crossout doesn't actually deal with any of the in-engine interactions. So it completely defeats the purpose of trying to improve the win rate of your deck going second if the opponent doesn't actually draw the blowouts. Because again, he might not even be playing them in the first place. Now with that said, there actually is one really good board breaker out there that does counter Featherstorm while also being good even if your opponent doesn't even turbo out the Featherstorm combo. The card goes by the name of Xyz Encore, and I think people will slowly start realizing just how good the card really is in the format. So Xyz Encore can be used at the very start of your draw phase by utilizing turn player priority so that your opponent cannot do anything before you, and then you can detach both of the materials of Castel and also bounce back the Castel so that on the resolution your opponent no longer controls a windowing beast monster for the Featherstorm. And of course your opponent cannot respond to Xyz Encore with Featherstorm, and again, since you have turn player priority, you get to use the Xyz Encore first. There is only one issue though. Just one tiny little microscopic problem. Xyz Encore can only be used on an Xyz monster that has Xyz materials. So if you play against like a 25 billion IQ Ryzeal player, he can actually use Castel's effect to shuffle back one of his own cards into the deck, and that way Castel no longer has Xyz materials and it becomes unaffected by Xyz Encore. Because yes, you can Castel yourself. Okay, realistically, nobody will ever use that effect, but in a world where, let's say, people can spy on your deck list, or if Fixie's Encore ever becomes mainstream, this will be an optimal play. Look, I'm just saying there is a counter to the counter, which means that the player going first has all the leverage. To think that board breakers are pretty much utter garbage is laughable, and hand traps are barely any better. I actually feel like I'm hand looping myself every single time I hand trap my opponent. It's actually really sad. Molchemy, nah, you're just getting ashed. Then Veiler, Imper, Mourner, whatever, nah, Book of Eclipse. And then anything else, cross out and Cobb at the grave. I swear to God, Konami really needs to chill with the degeneracy of the non-engine cards they design. Otherwise, Yu-Gi-Oh! Will eventually get to the point where regardless of the deck that you play or how you play it, nothing really matters. The game will simply be decided on who sacks the nastiest blowouts first. One could argue we're already in such format, which is funny because if you look at the playstyle of Ryzeal, it's actually incredibly healthy for the game. It actually feels really good to have a deck that doesn't take 25 minutes to make 10 Omni Negates, which prevent your board breakers from being used. But then again, they can sack you with their Floodgate because, again, they have room for so many non-engine cards that it really is a big problem. So I've already explained myself on this subject multiple times, but let me say it again. I believe it is fair game for board breakers to be extremely overpowered when Konami designs them, as you are already at a disadvantage when you're going second. So you need all the help that you can get to even things out. With that said, it is not fair to design stupid lingering floodgates that can just skip the opponent's turn and that are easy to access because you are already at a huge advantageous position when you're going first. If anything, the player going first should have the biggest handicap. But as it currently stands, board breakers in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are weak, and hand traps feel like you gotta draw multiple to do anything productive. And again, they have to resolve. Decks are far too resilient going first while still being overall garbage going second, which I actually find to be laughable. And lingering floodgates are still a part of the game, which makes them feel insufferable at times. I think that this can easily be fixed with a ban list where every single lingering card just dies once and for all. But then again, you can argue that some of them are fine, etc, blah blah blah. Shut up. Anyways, that's all I had for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know how you feel about these annoying cards like Harpy's Featherstorm in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.